2933.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title is read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate.
The Senate has passed without amendment committee substitute for House Bill 2945 relating to vendors paying a single annual fee for a permit issued by local health department.
Message to be received.
The Senate has passed with amendment committee substitute for House Bill 2947 relating generally to telemedicine prescription practice requirements and exceptions.
Message to be received. Lady from the 49th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill permits a physician who is practicing medicine through the use of telemedicine technologies to order a Schedule II drug to the hospital patient for immediate administration in the hospital. The Senate amendment prohibits this practice in an emergency department. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I move we concur with the Senate amendment.
The lady from the 49th moves that the House concur in the Senate amendment to House Bill 2947. Is there discussion? If not, those in favor will say aye. Those opposed will say no. The ayes have it. Chair declares the motion adopted. The question before the House is the passage of the bill as amended by the Senate. Those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, there are 93 ayes, 0 nays, 7 members absent not voting, a majority of members elected having voted in the affirmative. The chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2947.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title is read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate.
The Senate has passed with amendment and a title amendment House Bill 2968, adding a remote service unit to the definition of customer bank communications terminals.
Message to be received. Lady from the 32nd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The purpose of this bill is to also permit the installation and operation of what are known as remote service units by adding remote service units to the definition of customer bank communication terminal. The Senate amendment removes the requirement that remote service unit operators maintain a physical location in the state. Federal regulations preempt state geographic or operational restrictions on RSUs. Therefore, the House bill's requirement for banks to have a physical location in the state is prohibited. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I move we concur with Senate amendment and concur with the Senate title amendment.
The lady from the 32nd moves that the House concur in the Senate amendments and title amendment to House Bill 2968. Is there discussion? If not, those in favor of the motion will say aye. Those opposed will say no. The ayes have it. Chair declares the motion adopted. The question before the House is the passage of the bill as amended by the Senate. Those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, there are 93 ayes, 0 nays, 7 members absent not voting, a majority of members elected having voted in the affirmative. The chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
House Bill 2968.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title is read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate.
The Senate has passed with amendment and a title amendment committee substitute for House Bill 3131 relating to providing salary adjustments to employees of the Department of Health and Human Resources.
Message to be received. Lady from the 49th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The purpose of this bill was to exempt the Secretary of the Department of DHHR from certain Division of Personnel policies to hire additional personnel. The Senate amendment, though, removes the ability of the Secretary to set the salary ranges of his personnel and removes the expedited hiring process. However, the Senate did add in authority for the Secretary to create a special merit system for hiring of medical professionals at the state hospitals. The special merit system must be approved by the Division of Personnel no sooner than January. The hope is this change will enable the Secretary to provide higher wages to those healthcare professionals working at the state hospitals. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I move we concur with the Senate amendment and we concur with the Senate title amendment.
The lady from the 49th moves that the House concur in the Senate amendment and title amendment to House Bill 3131. Is there discussion? If not, those in favor will say aye. Those opposed will say no. The ayes have it. Chair declares the motion adopted. The question before the House now is the passage of the bill as amended by the Senate. Those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, there are 76 ayes, 17 nays, 7 members absent not voting, majority of members elected having voted in the affirmative. The chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for House Bill 3131.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title is read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate.
The Senate has adopted the conference report on and passed committee substitute for Senate Bill 295 relating to crimes against public justice.
Message will be received. The chairman of the ninth is recognized to present the conference committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your conferees on the disagreeing votes of the two houses as to the amendments of the House to the committee substitute for Senate Bill 295 having met after full and free conference have agreed to recommend and do recommend to their respective houses as follows. That both houses recede from their respective positions as to the amendment of the House by adopting disagreed to conference committee report, which accomplishes the following. Senate Bill 295, as presented, provided penalties for obstructing, interfering with, and attempting to disarm certain officers. Additionally, it conferred certain arrest powers on these officers. Finally, it made courthouse security officers law enforcement officers for purpose of the Federal Law Enforcement Officer Safety Act and gave them provisions to carry firearms if they meet certain training requirements. The bill included the state fire marshal, his assistant fire marshal, and deputy fire marshals and courthouse security officers into this definition of persons against whom obstructing an officer is a crime. The conference committee report adds corrections officers into this category. With regard to the arrest provisions, the conference committee report adds the words "or detention" to provide that obstructing officers in a lawful detention is a crime and adds correctional officers into this provision as well. Finally, the bill adds an effective date of July 1, 2020 for the provisions deeming courthouse security officers as law enforcement officers to give LEPs time to develop an education and training program sufficient to give those courthouse security officers without prior law enforcement training the needed skills to fully qualify as law enforcement officers. Mr. Speaker, I urge adoption.
The question before the House is the adoption of the conference committee report. The gentleman, the 32nd, Doug Fast.
Thank you. Would the gentleman from ninth yield?
Yes.
Thank you. Can you tell us what the training requirements are for the courthouse security officers?
Those training requirements are not set yet. That's why we moved the date to 2020 to give the Law Enforcement Professional Standards Office a time to create those standards, so it would be standards across statewide that they'd all be trained to.
Is this the bill that originally had a 1-week training requirement for courthouse security?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and so that right now, as the bill stands, there's no training requirements at all. It just says there has to be training, but it's undefined.
The training is undefined, and it will not go in effect till 2020, that will give time for the training to take place.
And you're retired law enforcement?
Yes.
And you advocate the passage of this bill?
Yes, I do.
Then so do I. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there other members who wish to speak to the adoption of the conference committee report? If not, then the question is on adoption of the conference committee report. Those in favor will say aye. Aye. Those opposed will say no. The ayes have it. Chair declares the conference committee report adopted. The question before the House now is the passage of the bill. Are there members who wish to speak to the passage of the bill? If not, those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, there are 96 ayes, 0 nays, 4 members absent not voting, a majority of members elected having voted in the affirmative. The chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 295.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title is read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate.
The Senate has refused to recede from its amendments and requests the appointment of a committee of conference of 3 from each House on the disagreeing votes on the two Houses on Senate Bill, Committee Substitute for Senate Bill 405, increasing limit on additional expenses incurred in preparing notice lists for redemption. The Senate conferees are Senators Bozos, Seipolt, and Palumbo.
The message will be received. Lady from the 49th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Senate Bill 405 that we have discussed, the purpose of that bill was to increase the limit on additional expenses which may be recouped if property is redeemed. The Senate amendment struck the language that would have protected the purchase of the property at the tax sale. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I move that the House refuse to recede from its amendments and the Senate be requested to agree to the appointment of a committee of conference of 3 from each House on the disagreeing votes of the 2 Houses, and that the Speaker be authorized to appoint conferees on the part of the House.
The question for the House is a motion by the lady from the 49th that the Speaker be authorized to appoint conferees for the Conference Committee on the disagreeing votes of the 2 Houses on Senate Bill 405. Those in favor will say aye. Aye. Those opposed will say no. The ayes have it. Chair declares the motion adopted. On this Conference Committee, the Chair appoints the gentleman from the 28th, Delegate Pack, the gentleman from the 62nd, Delegate Bibby, and the gentleman from the 24th, Delegate Tomlin. Clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate.
The Senate has amended the title on Committee Substitute for House Bill 2807, creating an additional modification to the West Virginia Adjusted Gross Income of shareholders of corporations engaged in banking.
The message will be received. The gentleman from the 28th, Delegate Pack.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee of Conference on Senate Bill 405, Delegates Bibby, Tomlin, and myself will meet in the Senate President's Conference Room at 7:30 p.m.
The lady from the 49th, Delegate Summers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The purpose of this, we are on committee substitute for House Bill 2807. The purpose of the bill is to provide the same tax exemption for persons, partners, and members of S corporations and limited liability companies engaged in state banking activities as is available to those engaged in banking activities as a C corporation. The amendments are technical cleanup in nature that were recommended by the Tax Division to make the exemption work, and a title amendment. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I move we concur in the Senate amendment and the title amendment.
The lady from the 49th moves that the House concur in the Senate amendment and title amendment to Committee Substitute for House Bill 2807. Is there discussion? If not, those in favor of the motion will say aye. Aye. Those opposed will say no. The ayes have it. Chair declares the motion adopted. The question before the House now is the passage of the bill as amended by the Senate. Those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? The gentleman from the 45th, Delegate Martin? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, there are 96 ayes, 0 nays, 4 members absent not voting, a majority of members elected having voted in the affirmative. The Chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee Substitute for House Bill 2807.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title is read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate.
The Senate has passed Senate Bill 424, Supplemental Appropriation of Civil Contingent Fund.
Message will be received. The lady from the 49th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that we take the bill up for immediate consideration, dispense with the committee reference, and have it read a first time.
The lady from the 49th moves that Senate Bill 424 be taken up for immediate consideration, the committee reference be dispensed with, and the bill be read a first time. Those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Members are seeking recognition. For what purpose does the gentleman in the 32nd, Delegate Fast, seek recognition?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Is this a rule suspension vote?
This is not a rule suspension vote. This is a majority vote. 51. A majority vote carries this particular question.
Thank you.
For what purpose does the gentleman in the 30th, Delegate Bates, seek recognition?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With the request for the gentlelady just to further explanation to which is, could you describe for me what the supplemental is, please? I didn't see it in the list of bills.
Yes, this is a supplemental appropriation to the Civil Contingency Fund appropriating $10 million out of the Treasury in the state fund into the Governor's Office Civil Contingency Fund. When the Governor declares a state of emergency, all payroll and disaster expenses for the National Guard mobilized are reimbursed by the Governor's Office. This money will be used to meet obligations from previous disasters, along with any future disasters that may occur.
And the lady's request is to take the bill up and have it read.
Take it up for immediate consideration and have it read a first time.
Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman, the 60th, Doug Wilson, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the lady please yield?
Yes.
Thank you, ma'am. I looked at the history of the bill. It looks like the Senate did a constitutional rule. They waived the constitutional rule so that they could take this up. Is that correct?
Yes, and we will do that on the second and third readings if this passes.
Yes, ma'am. Last minute appropriation, waive the constitutional rule. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The question before the House is the motion by the lady from the 49th that the House take up Senate Bill 424 for immediate consideration. Committee reference be dispensed with and the bill be read a first time. Is there objection to the lady's motion? If not, the clerk will read the bill a first time.
Senate Bill 424, Supplemental Appropriation of Civil Contingent Fund.
Bill will be advanced to second reading. Lady from the 49th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the constitutional rules that bills be read on 3 separate days be dispensed with and the bill be taken up for a second and third time and put upon its passage.
The lady from the 49th moves that the constitutional rule requiring the bill be read on 3 separate days be dispensed with, that the bill be read a second and third time and put upon its adoption. The gentleman from the 48th, Doug Miley.
Point of inquiry, are we suspending for all of these or just 424?
The lady's motion was just for Senate Bill 424.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman from the 30th, Doug Bates.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Gentlelady,
Yes.
Is it your intention, once this is dispensed with, to follow through with a request to suspend an additional time and to vote on its passage?
I did it in both motions, second and third time.
Second and third?
Yes.
Okay. And to the chair, this would require a rule suspension?
This would require a 4/5 vote. This does require a 4/5 vote for adoption.
Thank you.
The question for the lady from the 51st, Doug Fleischauer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have never seen the second and third readings be suspended together in a motion. I don't think I've seen that before. We do? Okay. I have been corrected.
Are there other members who seek recognition? If not, the question before the House is the motion by the lady from the 49th that the constitutional rule requiring the bill be read on 3 separate days be dispensed with, that the bill be read a second and third time and put upon its adoption. Those in favor of the lady's motion will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, there are 80 ayes, 16 nays, 4 members absent not voting, 4/5 of members present and voting having voted in the affirmative. Chair declares the motion adopted. The clerk will read the bill a second time.
Senate Bill 424.
Are there amendments? Are there amendments? If not, the bill will be advanced. Clerk will read the bill a third time.
Senate Bill 424.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? The gentleman, the 64th, Doug Householder, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, Senate Bill 424 is a supplemental appropriation of $10 million out of the General Revenue Fund into the Governor's Office Civil Contingency Fund. I urge passage.
The question before the House is the motion, or the question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Senate Bill 424. Are there members who wish to speak to the passage of the bill? If not, those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, there are 69 ayes, 27 nays, 4 members absent not voting, majority of members elected having voted in the affirmative. The chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Senate Bill 424.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title is read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Lady from the 49th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the bill take effect from its passage.
The lady from the 49th moves the bill be made effective from passage. Those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, there are 74 ayes, 21 nays, 5 members absent not voting, 2/3 of members elected having voted in the affirmative. The chair declares the bill effective from passage. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate.
The Senate has passed Senate Bill 435, supplemental appropriation.
Clerk has the availability of a conference committee report.
Available in the clerk's office are copies of the conference committee report on Senate Bill 596, adjusting voluntary contribution amounts on certain DMV forms.
Are there further conference committee reports? Are there further messages from the Senate? Are there further messages from the Senate?
The Senate has agreed to the appointment of a committee of conference of the two houses on committee substitute for Senate Bill 487 relating to admissibility of health care staffing requirements in litigation. The Senate conferees are Senators Takuba, Poso, and Wolfole.
Message to be received.
The Senate has agreed to the appointment of a committee of conference of the two houses on Senate Bill 596, adjusting voluntary contribution amounts on certain DMV forms. The Senate conferees are Senators Weld, Seipolt, and Jeffries.
Message to be received.
The Senate has adopted Senate Concurrent Resolution 65 requesting study allowing retailers pay sales tax for a consumer as means of advertising.
Message to be received. Resolution be referred to the Committee on Rules. Lady from the 49th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Subject to announcements, I move we recess until 9 p.m.
Lady from the 49th moves that subject to announcements, the House stand in recess until 9 o'clock. Are there announcements? The gentleman from the 10th.
Senator yield. Senator does yield.
Yes, sir. Senator, I'm popping back in here a couple minutes late. I just need to get caught up. I'm looking at the bill on the system. This looks pretty much like the original House bill. Is that what they sent back to us?
No, they sent back to us our bill without changing it. They refused to accept our bill.
Right.
And so I made a motion to recede from our amendment. That's been adopted, and now I've offered an amendment. That's the question we're on adoption of a new amendment, which is just Section 7, prime contractor's responsibility for wages and benefits, and it is in the exact same form that section was in when it left the Judiciary Committee and when it left the Senate.
I see that, Senator. Thank you. Is there any indication that they'll accept this with these changes?
I am told by little birdies that is likely, but they didn't they couldn't muster sufficient votes to pass it with the safe harbor section in it that we added.
Thank you, Senator. I appreciate it. I'm good with it. Thank you very much.
Other members desiring to speak to the amendment? Not. Question for the Senate is adoption of the amendment to the House amendment as offered by the Senator from Morgan County. All those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. Ayes appear to have it, the ayes do have it. Declare the amendment to the House amendment adopted. Are there further amendments?
No, sir.
Question now is, shall the bill pass? Is there further discussion? If not, all those in favor will vote yea. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? There's Blair. So the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the results. On this question being 29 yeas, 0 nays, 5 absent and not voting, more than a majority of those present and voting having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill passed. Clerk will communicate the action and send it to the House. Clerk has a conference committee report.
Have a conference committee report to file as it relates to Senate Bill 596, adjusting voluntary contribution amounts on certain DMV forms.
Report will be received.
Message from the House.
Clerk has a House message.
The House rejected the Senate amendments and asked the Senate to recede therefrom as it relates to engrossed House Bill 3044.
Message be received. A senator from Morgan County.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the Senate refuse to recede from its amendments to House Bill 3044 and that the Senate request a conference and appoint conferees.
Senator from Morgan County moves that the Senate refuse to recede from the amendments to House Bill 3044 and the chair be authorized to appoint a conference committee. All those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it, the ayes do have it. Declare the motion adopted. On behalf of the Senate, the chair appoints the senator from Wetzel County, the senator from Mercer County, and the senator from Monongalia County. Clerk will communicate the action of the Senate to the House. Clerk has a message from the House.
The House rejected the Senate amendments and asked the Senate to recede therefrom as it relates to engrossed committee substitute for House Bill 2503.
Message be received. The senator from Morgan County.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the Senate now recede from its amendments to House Bill 2503.
Senator from Morgan County moves that the Senate recede from the amendments to House Bill 2503. Is there discussion? The senator from Morgan County.
Thank you, Mr. President. We are told we have to tweak this just a little bit in order to get the House to agree. So if the Senate will recede from its amendment previously adopted, we're going to offer a new amendment and try to pitch that back to the east end of the building. I urge adoption of the motion to recede.
Is there further discussion? Further discussion? Not. The question before the Senate is adoption of the motion that the Senate recede from our amendments to House Bill 2503. All those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it, the ayes do have it. Declare the motion adopted. Senator from Morgan County.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to amend House Bill 2503.
Senator from Morgan County moves that the Senate amend House Bill 2503. The clerk has an amendment?
Yes, sir. Senator Trump moved to amend the bill
Senator
by
from
striking
Morgan
out
County.
everything.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request unanimous consent of the Senate to explain the amendment in lieu of having it read.
Is there objection? The chair hears none. The senator may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. This House Bill 2503 is the bill that relates to court actions, and its original purpose, as it came to us from the House of Delegates, was to try to limit circumstances when court-appointed counsel had to be appointed and paid for non-offending parents. And we've had some back and forth with members of the House on language. We have new language in this amendment there's a little bit of language that's stricken that we believe is going to solve the problem, and with continuing what's always been the law, that the child and parents who are accused, parents, guardians, custodian, anybody in loco parentis, anybody who's accused of any kind of misconduct or involving the child, is going to have counsel appointed for them automatically from the beginning of the proceeding. Be happy to try to answer questions. Otherwise, I urge adoption of this slightly revised amendment.
Is there further discussion? Not, all those in favor of the amendment as explained by the Senator from Morgan County will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it, the ayes do have it. Declare the amendment adopted. Are there further amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
The question now is, shall the bill pass? Is there further discussion? Further discussion? Senator from Morgan County.
Thank you, Mr. President. I've described the changes, which were very slight. Just to refresh your members' memory, this bill also contains, and this is unchanged, but the important language regarding juveniles in custody that we're also grateful to have had the assistance of the senator from the 5th and actually his daughter, who's a prosecutor, in helping us to craft. I urge passage of this bill.
Question for Senator, shall the bill pass? Is there further discussion? If not, all those in favor will vote yea. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the results. On this question, there being 30 yeas, 0 nays, 4 absent and not voting, more than a majority of those present and voting having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill passed. Clerk will communicate the action and send it to the House. The senior senator from the 16th.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent to return to the second order of business.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. Introduction of guests.
Thank you, Mr. President. We have in the gallery, in the President's gallery with us, the wife of our minority leader, the senator from Marion. We have Debbie Prezioso. If she'd stand and receive a warm Senate welcome.
Thank you. Further introductions. The clerk has a committee report, a House message. While we're on introductions, the senator from Morgan County.
Thank you, Mr. President. Very briefly, Amanda, please stand up. I'm delighted to have on the floor with us right now the Judiciary Committee intern all session long, Amanda Davis. She's a senior at WVU. She hails from Ritchie County. She's a senior studying public administration, and it has been a blessing to have her with us in the Judiciary Committee all session. I'd like the Senate to help me express our gratitude for her work.
Clerk has a House message.
The House amended and passed engrossed committee substitute for House Bill 2193.
Message be received. The junior senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the Senate concur in the House amendments to House Bill 2193.
Junior senator from the 17th moves that the Senate concur in House amendments to House Bill 2193. Is there discussion? The junior senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. The changes were technical and as well as the title amendment. I urge passage.
Is there further discussion? Not. All those in favor of the senator's motion will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. Declare the motion adopted. Question now is, shall the bill pass? Is there further discussion? Junior senator from the 8th. Further discussion. If not, all those in favor will vote yea. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the results. On this question, there being 30 yeas, 0 nays, 4 absent and not voting, more than a majority of those present and voting having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill passed. Clerk will communicate the action and send it to the House. Clerk has an announcement. Clerk has a House message.
The House appointed delegates Pack, Bibby, and Tomlin as it relates to engrossed committee substitute for Senate Bill 405. The Senate previously appointed Senators Boso, Seipolt, and Palumbo.
Message be received. Clerk has another House message.
The House amended the bill in title as it relates to Senate Bill 499, amending West Virginia tax laws to conform to changes in partnerships for federal income tax purposes.
Message be received. The Junior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the Senate concur in the House amendments to Senate Bill 499.
Junior Senator from the 17th moves that the Senate concur in House amendments to Senate Bill 499. Is there discussion? The Junior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. The bill updates our tax code to conform with federal changes regarding collection of taxes from a partnership. It does not impose a new tax, but allows West Virginia to capture taxes that are due to the state that they would otherwise not be able to capture without the code changes. The House made a number of technical changes and also changed the section regarding amended returns to make it consistent and similar to other sections in tax code regarding filing of amended returns. I urge passage.
Is there further discussion? Not, all those in favor of the Senator's motion will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have, the ayes do have. Declare the motion adopted. The question now is, shall the bill pass? Is there further discussion? Not, all those in favor will vote yea. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? So the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the results on this question being 28 yeas, 0 nays, 6 absent not voting. More than a majority of those elected having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill passed. Junior Senator from 17.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the bill be made effective from July 1, 2019. Request unanimous consent that the roll call used on passage of the bill be used to make it so effective.
Junior Senator from the 17th moves that the bill be made effective July 1, 2019, and requests unanimous consent that the roll call used on passage of the bill be used to make it so effective. Is there objection? Chair hears none. On this question there being 28 yeas, 0 nays, 6 absent and not voting, more than 2/3 of those elected having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill effective July 1, 2019. Clerk will communicate the action of the Senate to the House. Clerk announces availability of a conference committee report.
As it relates to the committee substitute for Senate Bill 522, creating special road repair fund.
Report will be received.